Hi, Jayashree. Good to see you.
Yeah, same here, Ashu. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the attendees that we have on. Thank you very much for joining the webinar live today. We will be starting in a few seconds from now, so just giving time for everybody to log on. So, Jayashree, I know we ran through this together, but just for the sake of the audience, I am going to uh, just go through the agenda for the meeting. What we'll do is we'll start with a very quick intro video on Syngene. I'll then follow up with a very brief description around Syngene, and then we'll get into the Q&A after what should be a detailed introduction of yourself as well.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. All right, Jed, that always gives me the goosebumps. I don't know about you.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah, it's a great video. So, welcome once again, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Ashu Tandon. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Syngene, and today I am joined by my esteemed colleague and one of the most eminent scientists that I know personally, Dr. Jayashree Aiyar. Jay, as she is popularly known, is a PhD from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in the capital Delhi, from India, after which she went to the United States and went to California to do her postdoc. She spent some time at Caltech and I think University of Irvine as well, where you did your postdoc, and worked for a number of years, close to 2 decades, in the Bay Area for a variety of biopharmaceutical sciences, and was really there at the beginning of the whole biotech revolution on the West Coast. For a variety of personal reasons, Jay decided to move back to India, and like she has done throughout her career, she has not looked back and is currently the vice president and head of our discovery biology unit, leading a team of extremely capable biologists in our discovery services unit. And currently, she's undertaking an activity or a whole set of activities that she didn't think she'd have to while trying to put science to work, which is about managing and delivering on science in the age of coronavirus. So, Jayashree, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you'd like to add anything about your background that I missed that you think is pertinent, um and we can start with the Q&A.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ashu, again. And thanks for the kind introduction. I'm looking forward to the questions.
All right, great. Uh, so just sort of housekeeping rules for everybody. I think on the right hand side of the screen you will see a small red rectangle with three white dots on it. So once you click on that, on those three dots, a small window will open on the right hand side of your screen, which will have a section for chat. So once you click on the chat, you will see a host of colleagues and host of attendees on the chat as well. Please send in your comments and questions for Jayashree or myself through the chat window. Our moderators will be looking at the chat, at the questions, and they'll be sending it across to Jayashree for answering. So Jay, I hope you could realize that during that whole process, I said questions to Jay, not to me. So I just want to make that very clear. Right.
Sure.
So Jay, let's kick it off, right? First of all, how are you doing, right? With the whole lockdown in India. Before we get into the meat of the matter, how are you doing? How's your family doing? How are things at home?
Yeah, I'm not, having been a professional for 30 years, I'm just not used to staying at home. So it's a little bit weird for me to actually work from home. I've never done that except on occasion when I'm sick or something and I stay at home. So this has been quite a different change for my lifestyle, both professionally and personally, right? My family is doing okay. Thanks for asking. My son is in the U.S. in California, and he's safe there. And we're all trying to make the best of these very unprecedented times that we're going through.
Yeah, I know the feeling as you mentioned that. So Jay, you lead a team of very competent and highly motivated scientists in the best of times. But as Charles Dickens said, right, we live in the best of times and it was the worst of times. So this is really close to the worst of times that we're seeing in our lifetime. How do you keep your scientists motivated at the bench level? And if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. But before that, if it's okay with you, I'll just give you a broad overview of what we do at Syngene and in discovery biology. Do you want
That'll
me to
be
go
great.
through that?
That'll be fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. So in discovery biology, I have about 400 scientists and growing. Every week we hire new people. And, we have a group, like you said, of very talented scientists that work on diverse activities within biology. So, we have half the group supporting large molecule research, such as protein sciences, antibody discovery, cell engineering, and so on. And then you have the other half that works on assays for both small and large molecules, in vivo pharmacology models against a variety of disease areas, and target engagement models as well. And then we have the ADME and PK group for supporting primarily small molecules. We also have a genomics and translational group that works on primary human samples from humans to bridge the data that we get from animal models to what's happening in the clinic. We have alliances with local hospitals as well. So, going back to your question, so that in a nutshell is what we do in biology. We do a lot of work for our clients in both the large molecule and small molecule space. We also work very collaboratively with our medicinal chemistry and safety assessment and research informatics groups on integrated drug discovery programs as well. Now, back to your question, Arshu, on how are we dealing with this COVID situation and how am I keeping the scientists engaged? So as I said, work from home is not something that I'm used to. And especially the folks that are doing bench work, it must be quite a different thing for them. So what we have done at Syngene is keeping the safety of the employees as highest priority, obviously, and adhering to all the strict guidelines that we are getting from the WHO and from the CDC on social distancing, on wearing masks, on frequently washing our hands, so on and so forth. Syngene itself has adopted a very good systems where everybody that is coming in, there's a temperature check as a primary screen, and then they're given masks on at the gate. People wear the masks and come in. So what I've realized is that during these times, our clients, since most of our clientele is in the US and Europe, most of those labs are shut down right now, right? And therefore, they are actually counting on us for more so than ever before. So thankfully, in India, the cases are on COVID are much more contained than the rest of the world. And our Prime Minister did a very good job on imposing the lockdown very early on in the game before things got out of control. So we are very happy that the Prime Minister took that move. So what we are doing right now is we are trying to use skeletal staff, right, coming into work. We have identified critical projects for our clients We have marked them, and we have communicated to our clients that these critical projects, especially the ones that are closer to the clinic, will continue with skeletal staff. So these staff, who are, by the way, the true heroes of Syngene, are coming into work, adapting all the safety precautions, and they are continuing to deliver for our clients. And the clients have been super appreciative of the work that we have done, where despite these trying times, we have been able to generate critical data for our clients. And so they're very happy with this.
Wonderful, Jay. That's a great thing. You talked about the personal experience as well as what your team is going through. And I, for the life of me, for somebody like you who's a scientist who's been in the lab all throughout, I know most of you guys don't like to work in the office. You like to be in the lab at the forefront of the action. And then if you're even a few steps removed from that to work from home, it must be very difficult. But talk to me a little bit about the kind of things that you're getting your team to do from home that they should be focused on as opposed to what happening in the lab.
Sure. So again, as I said, this has been a big learning for us, right, as to how to keep the team motivated, engaged, and productive. During these times when most of the time they are working from home. So one of the first things that we did at Syngene is we gave laptops, company-given laptops with all the security systems, the data security systems in place, to more employees than ever before. So everybody has access to a Syngene given laptop so that they can take a lot of that work home. So some of the things that we typically do at work, for instance, data analysis, for instance, report writing, for instance, even the electronic lab notebook writing and so on. Now we realize that some of that work can be done from home. In fact, all of that work can be done from home, because we don't need to be in the lab to do any of that work. So there's a big shift in that as a first step. The second thing that we are doing is, with the skeletal staff that is coming in, we are working very collaboratively to have the few people that are coming in further the other scientists' experiments in the lab. So if it means that you have to take a reading of your ELISA plate, or if you need to passage your cells or whatever, people are pitching in who normally wouldn't pitch in, because it's each scientist's own responsibility to complete their own experiments. These guys are pitching in and furthering the projects as well. So people are taking turns to come in, maintaining the social distancing, working on skeletal staff. 15 to 20% of the staff are the only ones that are coming into work. Syngene has been very good at providing transportation to these scientists, a door-to-door pickup and drop-off, using government-given passes and so on, so that they don't get into trouble with the cops. We are considered essential services, by the way, because we cater to the pharma industry and because we are furthering molecules closer to the clinic. So all of these are being done, and we have found very innovative ways of staying engaged with our scientific team. So we have regular meetings. We have even conducted town halls to the entire team virtually through virtual apps and so on. And in fact, we recently had a very touching farewell to one of our senior colleagues who was with us for 12 years, and he left. And it was very moving and actually quite effective doing it virtually. It was the next best thing we could do in the absence of a face-to-face cutting. We even cut a cake for him. It was great. I mean, it was great. We managed to make the best of the situation, if you will.
Yeah, no, I can understand that, and I can empathize with that. So Jayashree, as a leader, right, so sort of elevating the discussion for a question more from science to that of a leadership basis, perspective. Give us your perspective of what do you think are sort of the key parameters that leadership should demonstrate in these trying and difficult times.
Right, absolutely. So one of the big hallmarks of a leader is how to manage crisis, right? The ability to manage crisis, and so this is definitely one of those situations that could bring out the worst or could bring out the best in a leader, right? And I think one of the most important things for a leader to do is to instill a sense of calm and not create panic among our team members. We give them the reality, we give them the facts, and constantly keep providing them with information that will make them understand the situation that is going on around and why our senior leadership is making the decisions that they are, explained with very hardcore facts and justification so that the team feels motivated and empowered to do the work that they are doing currently. And so I think during the time of crisis, I think is something where the best can come out of not only the leaders but also the team members. So that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to stay engaged. This is also an extraordinary opportunity for us to give back to the community in terms of COVID research itself, and we can talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But those are the kinds of things we are doing. We're constantly in engagement with our team. Several of them are scared, to be very honest with you. What will happen to me if I come into work? Am I going to get infected? And there's a lot of fear, to be very honest with you. And so I think our job is to neither undo the fear by just sugarcoating it, nor create a panic situation. So we have to be in a situation where we're giving them the facts. We are all scientists. We respond very well to data, and therefore just a data-driven conversation really helps taking our team into this by a long stretch.
Wonderful. I think that's very interesting and very well said. You alluded to a point around the work that we're doing on the COVID-19 virus, or SARS-CoV-2 as it's called. Can you tell us a little bit about what Syngene is doing in this space from immunity, diagnostics, prevention perspective? Obviously, keeping client IP in mind and confidentiality in mind, but if you could just sort of give us an overview of what all we're trying to do, I think that would be really helpful.
Sure. Again, I'm privileged to be leading the discovery biology department, which is where most of the exploratory work happens, right?
Yeah.
And so on during these trying times of COVIDs, actually, ordinary people have the opportunity to do extraordinary things, right? And so one of the things that we have really motivated the team, and in fact, just about everybody wants to get involved in this, and they're all signing up for it. So we have to make sure that we are not overcrowding the labs, obviously, and we're taking good care of that. So the first thing in India is there's a dire lack of diagnostic kits, right?
Mhm.
So in fact, in India, a lot of this is underreported simply because only the sick are getting the PCR tests and so on. So considering that we have a very strong molecular biology group within my department, we are trying to put together components of the PCR reagents so that we can start screening first the Syngene and Biocon employees and then offer this at scale to our community. So that's one of the first things we are doing. So the PCR-based assays, and also we just started to work on the serological-based assays, and that's going to be a lot more informing because if you have IgG to COVID-19, that basically means that you've had the infection and you're in the recovery phase, and especially if you don't have the symptoms, of course. So these are the people that can be the frontline folks that can come into work, right? In fact, this is something that we can do for our healthcare workers, for our scientists and others. So that piece of information is going to be very informing on who can come into work first and who can stay back home and so on. Gives you a lot of confidence that we're putting the right people in without creating any safety risks for them. So there's a serological assay that is being planned. We're also working towards, since we have a very strong antibody discovery group, we're also working towards an antibody paradigm where we are trying to clone the antibody sequence from patients who've been infected with COVID, get that sequence and try to understand this and make it recombinantly so that we can as a passive immunity methodology to give to people who are at high risk, people over 60 years of age, the healthcare workers, the cops, and so on, who have to go out there in their line of duty. So that's another thing. These are not some things that we're going to have tomorrow. It is going to take time, but we have them all initiated. And then finally, we're also working towards some vaccine ideas. Since we have both discovery, development, and manufacturing capabilities at Syngene, we can take it all the way to manufacturing again to give back to the community.
Yeah, that's great. Jayashree, on that front, there's a question here from one of the audience members asking whether we are doing any patient-specific primary culture or any ex vivo culture for within drug discovery?
We are not, unfortunately, because we do not have a BSL lab. We are not BSL 3 labs, and so we are not able to work with any COVID positive virus samples, right? So we are unable to do that right now. But in lieu of that, we can do a whole bunch of other things. We are trying to find pseudotyped viruses, which we can use as a surrogate for the real virus, which will have much better safety profiles and so on. But currently, we do not have the capabilities for BSL 3 and therefore cannot culture the live virus.
Okay, wonderful. Um, and Jayashree, what's your view on you mentioned some stuff that we're doing around vaccines, and I know you're clued in globally to some of the work that's happening across different industry groups and companies. What's your view on some of the viruses that a lot of different companies have announced, and when do you think they'll start getting available?
Sorry, what have people announced again? Sorry.
I'm saying, we see a lot of companies, right? AstraZeneca has announced something around antibody therapy. Regeneron is doing
Regeneron has, yeah,
vaccine. Janssen has announced a large vaccine stuff. The Gates Foundation has announced they're working on multiple targets.
right,
Gilead is working on remdesivir and a clinical trial around that.
correct.
What's your view around, what sort of where the likely vaccine is going to work in this case, right? I mean, if you could talk a little bit about, when, what your view is on the vaccines that are currently publicly announced, and when do you think we'll start seeing mass production?
Yeah, so as with any drug discovery programs, even though we are in very trying situations, everything that we discover in the labs has to go through a clinical trial and has to go through FDA approval. So that process, as much as we can cut short the time, one needs to go through that process to keep the standards, quality standards very high and safety standards very high. So I would say that for a vaccine to come out optimistically, I mean, Janssen, for instance, has talked about the clinical trials starting in September, or the scale up starting in September, and we'll be ready for giving it to patients maybe sometime early January of next year. And similarly, Regeneron's antibodies. So the earliest we are seeing is early next year is probably when we will have these things. But I may be wrong because I'm not completely up to speed with several of the activities going on. I mean, there's a avalanche of information that's coming out, and it's very hard to keep up with the latest right now. So um, these things do take time. I think everybody is working around the clock, including Syngene, to come up with solutions to combat this virus. So let's just keep our fingers crossed and hope that in 4 to 6 months we'll have a solution.
Yeah, it's interesting because I read in on one of the journals. I think it was a link sent out by Nature, talking about the fact that there are so many scientific minds across varied environments and varied backgrounds working on it, that the hope is actually grounded in a lot of reality, that some things will work out pretty quickly, because there is just so much effort happening worldwide. It's not as if it's only linked to a particular region or a particular kind of patients. It's everybody, right? And therefore it's impacting everybody.
Absolutely, and I think the entire one of the good things that has come out of this is,
Mm.
as scientists usually have our own ideas, we tend to keep it to ourselves and try to work on it ourselves. But we have seen a complete paradigm shift where everybody is sharing the ideas with everybody else, because the ultimate goal is to come out with a solution as soon as we can. So I've been privileged to be networked with so many people. In fact, I would say on an average day, at least I have 2 to 3 phone calls with several biotech companies around the world who are reaching out to us to see if we can provide solutions to some of the ideas that they have, and also to collaborate with us on several aspects of COVID. So to look at the silver lining on this is the fact that the scientific community has really come together to solve this problem. So
Yeah.
I'm happy about that.
Yeah, Jayashree, I'll pivot to a couple of questions that have come in from our audience. So
Okay.
Caitlin Weaver asks us that how do you manage procurement of raw materials and animals in this current time frame? So do you want to take a start at that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, but what we have seen is there have been, the since the situation is so fluid, the regulations around the procurement, the shipments, and so on are also changing on the fly, right? So I think we were completely okay a couple of weeks back, and then it got really difficult when the commercial and the freight flights were also canceled, and now we are seeing these things come back up again, right? So one of the things that so we only stock up things for our own immediate work. So this is something that we hadn't expected to happen. So we don't have enough of reagents to start the work. But thankfully, the government and I think across the globe, anything COVID related, I think they're expediting the shipments and so on. So as long as we have the right documentation that these are primers or antibodies or what have you for COVID related work, we have managed to get these into India. So while the situation could have been a lot worse, it hasn't been that bad. There've been a week or 10 days delay, but not more than that.
Yeah, freight travel is still ongoing. It's just that the number of flights are lesser. So, so there is just a bit of a delay in the procurement. But luckily, I think for most of the starting materials and reagents, etc., we do have quite a bit of an inventory, and we're just carrying extra of it right now.
Right, right.
There's another question from David over here that says that asks that how are you managing and ensuring data integrity and safety when the scientists are working from home?
Right. So our Syngene laptops have a whole bunch of data security systems and processes enabled in them. So we do not allow people. I mean, there's no access to data and such from people's personal laptops. Everything has to go through the VPN system and through the tunnel, the Syngene tunnel. So
Mhm.
we take our data security very seriously, and so we maintain the same qualities that we would when we are at work, and the same qualities are implemented when we are working from home as well. So I think people don't need to worry about that at all.
Yeah, and it all goes through the VPN, the company VPN, so it's all secure
Very
from that.
circular. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So,
Yeah.
uh, what would you say has been some of the impact on our clients' projects, and how have you been managing that? I know you're in daily discussions with a number of clients every day on looking at prioritizing research projects and what activities, what studies are being done. So, can you give us an overview of that?
Yeah, so before I go there, just one thing that occurred to me on the previous question on the data security. At Syngene, there is no way in which you can, for instance, email your data to your Gmail address or even copy paste or anything like that, right? So those kinds of systems are in place. So if there's a worry that from home somebody might be sending it through their Gmail, it just is impossible for that to happen. So I just want to add that in there.
Yeah.
The data is very, very secure because everything goes through the tunnel and the secure systems. Um, so on the question of how are we managing this with clients, I think one of the first things that we did was we got on a call with each one of them and basically managed the expectations. Right, we said that the nation is on a shutdown mode, and therefore there will be a hit in productivity. There's no doubt about that. But having said that, we're trying our best to move on critical projects. And in fact, we worked with the client to identify what those critical projects would be, considering that we only had limited skeletal staff coming in. So that's how we manage this with our clients. And in fact, in biology, most of our work is being delivered, albeit with a delayed timeline. And clients are pretty appreciative that we have managed to do this when most of the world has completely shut down their labs. So that's how we're managing this constant communication with our clients. Every week is a different update, right, from the previous week, and so we are we are, uh, we are taking it one day at a time.
Yeah, no, no, that's true. There's a question that's come in, which is seems more medical doctor oriented, but I'll just still throw it at you, Jay. It's Manish is asking as to what's your take on the convalescent plasma therapy against COVID-19. Do you want to take that? Hello. Looks like Jay's video has is frozen right now, so we'll just wait for her to get back.
Sure.
Jay, are you there? I think she's joining back.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. You're perfectly clear. So Jay, let me
Okay, good.
repeat the question. Right, one of the questions that came in from Manish was, "What's your?" And Manish was very clear that this question is for Jay, not for me. Uh, but what's your take on the convalescent plasma therapy?
Yeah, so the way the convalescent plasma therapy works is that the notion behind that is that people who have been infected with the virus and
Hmm.
who have recovered from the infection completely, no symptoms, maybe they've had initially some symptoms and they've recovered completely from it, would have high levels of antibodies to the COVID virus, right? Because their immune system has evoked a response that has eliminated the virus. So one option is to take lots of blood from the convalescing patient, isolate the immunoglobulins, which would contain a high proportion of COVID specific antibodies, and then give it as passive immunity to those that are very severely ill and almost dying from this infection. So while it is a very good strategy because it's the most immediate medicine you can get, if you will, in the absence of for the previous question of the vaccines and the antibodies and stuff are going to take time because they have to go through clinical trials and so on. While this is a good method, it's not something that's scalable at all, right? So you can only give it to a select few patients who are very severely ill, and you have to obviously go through regulatory guidelines in terms of getting patient consent, having shown some in some laboratory capacity that those antibodies that you isolate actually do work against the virus in vitro and so on and so forth, that they have neutralizing antibodies to the virus. But as a first pass therapy, this has been used in many other infections in the past, and it has been very effective. The only thing is it's not scalable, and that's a big downside.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. In fact, I was going to mention, and one of our participants, Sandeep, has also mentioned this. Mount Sinai has recently started a trial on such a therapy, and I also read yesterday that my neighborhood hospital, Robert Wood Johnson in New Jersey, also started that as well. So there is some activity going on in that direction as well.
Yeah.
Um, so sort of just you know. um going a little lighter on the topic, right? A little away from science. As a scientist, I never, I don't think you would have heard about scientific research and work from home sort of in the same sentence, right? So, for those bench scientists that are dialed in, and for those people that are working with a lot of bench scientists and leading people, what are some of the top two or three tips that you would suggest personally and professionally in terms of working from home? And this is just purely from a biologist standpoint.
Yeah, again, as I said, right, you're absolutely right. I mean, because we are a lab based organization, unlike the IT industry, we never ever would have thought that people would be stuck at home and we have to find creative ways of being productive and engaged while we are at home. So the number one thing here is as I've learned during these last couple of weeks is that one needs to be very organized, right? Even though you're working from home, even though you're in the home setting, it doesn't mean that you can just goof off and do whatever you want. So you have to be extremely organized. In fact, so organized that you can sometimes be a lot more productive, especially the managerial level,
Mhm.
who are not constantly going to the labs to do stuff. The other thing is that you one of the things that I've started doing, and I need to do this more, and my boss does this with me, is that when you're having your telecons, it's better to turn the video on, so it gives you more of a personal touch and you're actually looking into the person's eye and talking. It gives you the feeling of a face to face while it's not, because usually most of our telecons happen with just the audio mode, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes it is helpful to turn on the video mode, and I will try to do that more often with my direct reports. And then of course we need to find ways in which to keep the scientific team engaged. So what we have done is, we used to have journal clubs, right? So the
Yeah.
journal clubs can now happen virtually. People take an interesting paper and they discuss it over webinars and so on. Speaking of webinars, we have a lot of scientific webinars that we are collecting and keeping the scientists engaged. We almost have a webinar or two every day on scientific topics of interest. This is actually a great opportunity for people to catch up on scientific literature and on scientific protocols and know-how and so on, because most of the complaints people have is that, oh my god, I had to do so much experimentation that I just didn't have the time to read those papers. Well, now's the time to do it because you have time in your hands because you're not working in the lab all the time, right?
Right.
So all the SOPs that we have, standard operating procedures for our different lab work. This is a good time to catch up on your SOPs, catch up on your learning and development module. So, believe it or not, our scientists are kept very engaged with these kinds of activities. And of those of them who are dedicated to client programs, we are also keeping them engaged with client related scientific material, right? So if somebody is working on CAR Ts, for instance, we are having some very healthy discussions on how to progress this to the next step. What are the latest in CAR Ts that are coming up in the literature, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. One of the things that struck me was, if you had carried out a survey, well, a lot of people carried out surveys of the US pharma industry and impressions about the US pharma industry. And with your background and your work experience in the US, you know this fairly well, that the general reputation of the pharma industry in the United States is very low. People think of it as essentially making a lot of profit, and there's just like any other typical corporate enterprise. And in fact, in a recent survey in the US, about 3, 4 months ago, before the whole coronavirus thing broke out, they rated the pharma industry just above the House of Representatives, just above Congress. So that was a pretty low bar for everybody, right? And now, just given so much focus over the last 4 weeks around coronavirus and the work that scientists and a lot of pharma companies are putting in, what's your view on whether this will make a substantial difference to the sort of to the impression that the industry has amongst the general public, particularly in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the pharma industry always has a bad rep for being seen as a profit-making organization rather than reaching out to patients. In reality, I think I get this from my family a lot, right?
Yeah,
Oh, medicines cost so much money, blah blah blah, and I keep telling them, look, we have to spend so much money on research, and it takes if you're optimistic 10 to 20 years, right, for a drug to make it to the market. And therefore we somehow need to recoup all the money, all the investments we have made on the research, and then of course the failure rates are high as well. So whereas now in the COVID situation, I think there are so many companies, including ours, that are willing to reach out to the community and on a not for profit basis, just to be able to overcome this pandemic, right? And so now you can start seeing the human side, if you will, of the pharma industry, and you can see that really we are not about the profits are important, but their profits always come as a secondary thing, right? It's
yeah,
about getting something to the patient, and then the profits follow. It's not the other way around. So I think that's something that people need to recognize.
yeah. No, I think that's an important thing. So, Jay, we do have a few minutes left, and there are a lot of audience questions that are coming in through the chat. So I'm just going to read some of them out for
Yeah, do
you.
you want me to pick some of them? I'm just trying to see if
That's a great one, Jay. I was hoping you would do that.
okay, I'm just trying to see external cell therapy. I'm not that anything that I know. I don't know if I can see all of the same ones that you can.
You and I can see the same ones here.
Okay. Is there a role of autophagy in respiratory complication? I do not know. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah.
Um, do you look at current scenario as to get more
We can,
business? In fact, good opportunity for pharma and CRO industries in India to get more business. Um, the business is coming our way. We are not making any extra effort because of the COVID situation. And believe me, I think 90% of our of the questions that are coming to us are COVID related right now. Can you make us this PCR probe? Can you make us this spike protein? Can you make us um, can you do, would you be able to run these tests for us, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
yes, I mean it is a good opportunity, but really at Syngene we are not looking at it from a commercial angle. We're looking at it primarily from how can we help solve this problem, and how can we help address this issue. How can Syngene pitch in with all the talent pool that we have? So that's the approach that we're taking right now.
Yeah, and I do think the other angle to this is, Jay, coronavirus is a big problem. It's a pandemic, and it's affecting 7 billion people worldwide. But that does not mean that all the other illnesses have gone into the background. There are still people suffering from heart disease. There's still people suffering from other metabolic disorders, diabetes, etc. There are still kids with cancer therapy. There's still kids who need, all of those therapies happening. So there's a lot of other research that needs to happen, and that we need to get to the market. So I think it's not about benefiting from this scenario. It's about just seeing how can we put science to work, and how can we help getting safe and effective drugs quicker to the market.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the reason why while we are doing a lot, at least there's a lot of hopes on the COVID research that we're currently doing in the labs. We have never lost sight of our client programs that are critical, that are against various diseases such as cancer and so on. So we are trying to juggle both activities here. There's one question from Vaishali about what about the current situation, and what do you think worries you the most, and what gives you the most hope? It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the thing that
I
worries
thought,
me the whole.
Jay,
Uh-huh.
before you answer, I thought that would be a good one to end the session on
Oh,
as
okay.
well.
Are we close to ending it, or how are we doing on time?
So why don't you we are about 45 minutes into it, which is what we had budgeted for. So I think we're good on time. Take your time in answering that, because I think it's a very important question and covers all angles, and then I'll do the closing from our side.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can also take the other question first, which is, has all other research now taken a backseat with COVID? No, I don't.
Yeah.
The
No,
research
not
has not taken a backseat at all. In fact, we are working on client projects, like I just said. We have a lot of things we are doing on cancer, on metabolic disorders, neuroscience, cardiovascular. So we are progressing those projects as well. And so we are taking it there. There is a question on the chloroquine and azithromycin, zinc, and all that. Really, I'm not a medical doctor, so it's not my place to be commenting on that. I do know that in India, some of the doctors have approved it as a therapy for very severely ill patients. What I understand from reading the literature is that they do have side effects, and therefore one has to be quite careful as to how you administer it under medical care. Um, and guys, again, high throughput screening of different small molecules. Yes. So from the small molecule angle, we are also collaborating again in a philanthropic fashion with some of our clients on targeting specific enzymes of COVID-19 using small molecule approaches. In fact, using a structure based or a fragment based approach. So those kinds of collaborations are also ongoing. It's not just antibodies and vaccines. We're also trying to come up with small molecule drugs, the equivalent of the chloroquines, but with a greater specificity and safety margin, if you will. Now, to the last question that Ashu, that you said we'll take on, what would worry me the most in this crisis situation, and what gives me the biggest hope? Um, I think what would worry me the most, at least in the Indian setting, is when the lockdown period is going to be relaxed a little bit, that people just swarm back into the malls and into movie theaters and all that stuff. That worries me, because those of you that have lived in India, we're a population of 1.3 billion. People in general, as a culture, love to stick to each other as a community. So that worries me, because then you could have, we are trying to flatten the curve, and then if it goes back up, it's going to take a much longer time for the curve to come down. So hopefully the government will come up with a very staged and gradual approach to remove the lockdown rather than suddenly one day everybody can come back to normal. So that's a little thing that worries me, that people will not take it too seriously and think that the virus is gone one fine day. It doesn't work like that. So we have to flatten the curve, and it is a gradual process. It's an excruciating process, but we have to follow all the guidelines and norms set by the health authorities and by the government. What gives me hope is the fact that we have bonded so closely together as a community, not just as a scientific community, but just as human beings. And this has given us the chance to sort of sit up and say, it's not everything is about making PowerPoint presentations all the time. It's about fighting for a cause and contributing back to society, and coming up with treatments and cures to combat this virus. So I do have a lot of hopes that we will very soon find something that and put this behind us as something that we could tell our grandchildren, did you know that we were part of that COVID crisis and how we survived it and came out of it. So I'm very, very hopeful that we will be at that stage very soon.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think it's a great way to end the session on hope, on high. I am very hopeful to our scientists for discovering a cure. I'm very hopeful when I see stories of all the medical workers, right? Doctors, nurses, custodial staff in hospitals, literally being at the front line of this war, trying to save each individual patient and trying to sort of prevent the spread of it. A lot of work being done by epidemiologists, virologists, to study patterns and try to figure out what's happening. So I think a lot of people have come together worldwide, 7 billion of us, and together we will survive and we will conquer this. So thank you once again, Jayashree, and thank you
So,
very much.
one question I had for you, and maybe the people, many of the people in the chat are asking how to get in touch with us for any work. So, how do we go about doing it? Can we give our email
Yes.
addresses or something like
Well,
that?
so I was going to address that. So for people whose questions we could not answer, and for those who have additional questions, please send your emails to team.syngene@syngeneintl.com. I'll repeat it once again. It's team.syngene@syngeneintl.com. If you know our email IDs, you can send that to us or to your point of contact at Syngene, and we'll be able to answer that as well. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you so much for the audience to attend, and we will look forward to meeting more people in our next session next week. So stay
Yeah, and
tuned. Stay.
I'd like to thank all the audience for patiently hearing us out, and for some of the very insightful questions. And we look forward to working with some of you here as well.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.